Hey, today we're going to take a deep dive into the best traits for Project Zomboid and the best worst traits for the game as well. A tiered list, if you will, to help you better understand the game and essentially how different traits affect the gameplay so you can become the pro's pro of Project Zomboid like yours truly. I was going to do 2 videos on this subject initially, but considering that picking on one side affects what you can pick on the other side, simply made more sense to combine the two. By the way, if you're looking for more beginner Project Zomboid videos and tips and whatnot, I have a playlist for that. I'll stick a link to it up in the top left corner. You can always subscribe to the channel if zombie games and simulation games are your jam. You can like, subscribe to the channel, yada yada, and all that stuff. Anyway, onto the list. When choosing traits, both positive and negative, you're going to want to choose negative traits that don't adversely affect your fighting and looting capabilities. On the other side, you're going to want to go with positive traits that will positively affect those capabilities. It's a balancing act of sorts. Because of this, my number one positive trait, my trait that rules them all, so to speak, is going to be strong, even though it comes at a pretty hefty price of 10 points. The reason for this is simple. You'll be able to do more melee damage the stronger you are, plus 140% if you're wondering, and can carry more without an encumbrance penalty. And as you know, as you get this encumbrance penalty, your stamina starts to take a hit. You'll also be able to push down zombies easier than if you were weaker. But the reason goes a bit deeper than that because both strength and fitness level up so much slower than the other skills. It would take literally months of regular exercise to get to the point where you will get to the level that strong is at. Just to give you an example of exactly how long it would take, consider this. If you were to take no buff for your strength, just normal strength, you would be level 5, and it would take 30,000 XP to reach level 6. At the strong level, you would need literally 150,000 XP to top out your strength. The biggest advantage of going with strong is the weight you can carry without an encumbrance penalty. At normal strength, you can carry 12, while being strong will give you 18 to start with, which is great for not only going on longer loot runs, but you will tire out less often because you won't reach the point of being encumbered as often. Stout is also decent, although price-wise, strong is much better as the cost for 2 extra levels and the 140% melee damage is only an extra 4 points. Alternately, weak or fable are terrible in this respect because of the little weight you can carry and will be at the bottom of my worst traits to take list. This is a looting game, y'all, and it completely sucks when you realize that once you find a weapon, you'll be right at the edge of encumbrance if you are weak, and if it doesn't get much better if you are feeble. In Project Zomboid, you're going to be doing a lot of fighting, but sometimes it's not the actual fighting that matters in the long run, but being able to move and see your surroundings while you are fighting. I can't tell you how many times I've died to a muff swing or worse, been ambushed from behind. Because of this, these 2 traits are 2 of my must-haves if combat is your thing. Keen hearing literally expands your range of sight behind you by 200%, which means that you will see them coming from behind much quicker. It's a lifesaver in terms of fighting against bigger groups when a horde can pop up behind you with very little notice. My final trait on the S tier is the Gymnast Hobby, which gives you a +1 in light-footed and a +1 in nimble, and both have a +75% XP buff. Nimble is a very powerful skill to work on, and unless you are a burglar, this is the only trait that will give you an advantage to work it. So how good is it? Nimble affects your movement while you are in combat stance. Most fighting mechanics are centered around moving backwards while fighting. The higher your nimble skill, the faster you can move while backing up. Nimble is also a very difficult skill to level up, so for the points, -6 in the case of both Keen Hearing and Gymnast, I think that both traits are worth the stretch in terms of cost. Of course, taking Strong, Gymnast, and Keen Hearing right out of the gate is going to cost you 22 trait points, and you're going to have to take some negative points to balance it out. Here are my S tier in terms of the best negative traits to take. A caveat here, Project Zomboid is still a work in progress, and these best could easily turn into definite no's if the devs change it up. My best negative traits, the ones I pick almost by default, are the following: slow reader, short-sighted, weak stomach, prone to illness, smoker, high thirst, slow healer. Collectively, they account for 27 whopping points, which easily allows for my positive S tier traits. Why do I choose these every time, though? Slow reader because we can speed up time while reading, short-sighted because wearing glasses can help negate the negative effects, and even without them, the penalty isn't severe enough not to take it. Frankly, it's usually not the zombies in front of you that will get you killed anyway. Weak stomach because although there is a 200% chance of food illness, currently this only applies to rotten food, uncooked meat, dirty water, and poisonous things in the wild, and can easily be avoided by just avoiding consuming those things. Prone to illness because it only affects cold and zombification rates when infected. Colds you can mitigate with food and sleep and rarely happens if you stay out of the rain and don't get too cold. Obviously, zombification rates, there's nothing you can do about it. Smoking because it's the 90s, man. Literally everyone smoked back then, and you can easily build up a stockpile of cigarettes quickly. While you are looking, you can mitigate the eventual depression with cooking good food, eating chocolate, and reading books. High thirst because water in the game is abundant, and although you may have to carry an extra water bottle, every new house is going to have at least a few bottles of water left in the tap and toilet even when the water gets turned off. Finally, slow healer because currently scratches and lacerations heal within a couple days, and deep wounds and fractures rarely happen. Of course, this could easily change as the game changes. If suddenly a scratch or laceration took a few weeks to fully heal, or if you randomly could get sick out of the blue, my feelings for these negative traits would change. If you've chosen a profession that gives you an advantage with a particular type of weapon, you can choose to skip my A-tier traits as they are all combat focused. Then again, you could always choose one of the two, or both, I'm about to mention to give you an advantage in a couple weapon types. My two A-tier traits are Brawler, which gives you a +1 in Axe and Long Blunt but costs 6 points, or Baseball Player, which gives you a +1 in Long Blunt and costs 4 points. I think it's important to point out that it isn't necessarily the +1 in these weapon types that makes either of these traits so good, as much as it is the +75% XP boost you get when using those weapons. And the XP advantage stacks, so if you choose a profession that already has an expertise in the weapon type, for example, Fireman or an Axeman already gets the +1 in the Axe skill, if you were to choose Brawler on top of this, your level would be +2 coming out of the gate with a 125% XP boost. Oh, and I almost forgot Fit, which gives you a +2 in fitness and costs 6 points. Fitness directly affects your ability to fight longer and can be good if you are in high population areas and trying to clear them. I didn't put athletic in this tier because of the cost and the extra benefits that I feel personally don't match the cost associated with them. Yeah, I know that it takes super long to build those up, but as your combat skills grow, you'll be swinging your weapon less and less, so overall, I think it's a wash. Fit is in the A tier list and not in the S tier list. Moving on to the A tier list negative traits. If you don't mind constantly getting spotted by zombies and fighting, for the points, Conspicuous is a decent negative trait to take for 4 extra points. It essentially gives you the chance to be spotted twice as often, or 200%. You didn't choose it, and for the player like myself that doesn't use sneaking and prefers wiping the zombie menace off the face of the earth, it doesn't necessarily matter if I'm seen or not. Another good trait, but one that will likely change with the next big update, would be Hearty Appetite. Hearty Appetite comes in at a +4 points, and the only downside is that you will need to eat more low-calorie items like salads and fruit to avoid becoming overweight. One thing to note here, if you choose it though, hunger tends to lower encumbrance. And I should also mention that the current nutrition system is flawed in the fact that it is much easier to lose weight than gain it, so eating a lot of food won't have you putting on the pounds as quickly as you think. Next up are things I may take or may not take depending on what points I have available. None of these are must-haves in my opinion, but are more quality of life traits that I can take or leave. These are my B tier list positive traits. For the points, Outdoorsman is an excellent choice because it only costs 2 points and is particularly good for avoiding getting scratched and lacerated, as well as having your clothes torn up while running through trees and bushes. Plus, you can basically kiss colds goodbye. Another positive trait that is only 2 points is Dexterous, which makes transferring items much, much faster. It literally cuts transfer time by half and is excellent in those times when you need to get in and out of places because you have a horde bearing down on you. Its counterpart, All Thumbs, is one of the worst negative traits you can choose because you're getting 2 points in exchange for a 400% transferring time. In my opinion, it could very well be the all-time worst trait you could choose. Amateur Mechanic is a good trait because it gives you a +1 in mechanics and you can immediately repair all vehicles without needing the skill books. This is particularly tasty because you can't hotwire cars without a level 2 in mechanics and level 1 in electrical. It comes in at a cost of 5 points. And finally, rounding out the B tier list is the Organized trait, which increases the storage rate of everything you have access to by 30%. Personally, I think that 6 points is a little rich for my blood, but in the case of looting, it's nice to be able to have more space in a backpack. It also affects car trunks and cupboards. At 6 points, underweight makes the B tier for negative traits, although I must say in this game, it is much easier to lose weight than to gain weight. The reason why I chose underweight over overweight is that there is no fitness ceiling for underweight, while with overweight, you are essentially capped at level 9, if you even get there. Other than a stamina debuff, the only big negative is the 80% melee damage, but if you chose strong, it would make that choice a wash. One big problem with choosing negative traits based on weight is that even if you can get back to a normal weight, you'll still have an unfit debuff until you get to the normal range in fitness. But even this wouldn't convince me that this would be a terrible negative trait to pick. Although I rarely pick this trait, unlucky I feel deserves a place in the B tier as the addition of 4 points is pretty fair considering that you only lose a 10% chance of finding rare loot. This is especially the case for any loot setting over the insanely rare loot setting, as loot is generally easy to find if you know where to look for it. Considering the fact that over time your Zomboid character will grow accustomed to zombies and become less panicked, Cowardly may pay off dividends mid-game, as although you would be more prone to panic than someone not cowardly, you would increasingly become less panicked with time even with the trait. At 2 points, it would hold value for those who reach mid-game often. And finally, rounding out the B tier list is the Pacifist trait. Although it cuts down weapon effectiveness by 25%, as your weapon levels increase, it will make the cost a wash should you live so long. And it is 4 extra points added. Onto our C tier list positive traits. The following aren't necessarily bad traits to take, but they are traits that are more focused on a playstyle that isn't a good fit in my own personal playstyle. Both graceful and inconspicuous are perfect for a stealth build, as both affect when you are spotted or heard. Graceful reduces your sound radius by 40%, while inconspicuous lowers your chances of a zombie seeing you by 50%. This is important because your sneaking skill levels based on zombies that you're around that don't notice you. If you were to combine these 2 traits with a burglar and gymnast skill, you would likely level up your sneak very quickly. Both of these skills cost 4 points each. As an aside, both of these traits would have ranked much higher in the previous build 40, as you could literally walk by zombies unseen even when they were facing you. At 2 points, Wakeful reduces your sleep time by 30%, which means you have more time to do the things we all do in Zomboid. We loot and kill. Once again, not saying this is a bad trait, and certainly is a value in cost, but I prefer to keep an 8-hour sleep schedule. And the times I've used it, I've been frustrated by waking up at 3 a.m. and basically waiting until the morning because I had no book to read and nothing to do, and I didn't want to fight at night. Finally, rounding out my C list is Handy, not because it isn't good, but because the price of 8 points doesn't necessarily match the benefit of having it. Handy gives you a +1 in carpentry, but more importantly, a +1 in maintenance. Maintenance is particularly useful because it affects the durability of your weapons. Getting a 75% XP boost in maintenance is good, but at an 8-point cost, there is no value, which is why it's on my C list. Still though, there are no traits associated with maintenance other than Handy on the list. There is better value in choosing the repairman or chef profession and skipping it altogether, as both give you experience modifier in maintenance. I only have 3 negative traits in my C tier, 2 of which can be situational, and 1 that can turn a decent run into a total catastrophe. Both agoraphobic and claustrophobic sound manageable until you realize that it will make simple things like sleep nearly impossible. With claustrophobic, you won't be able to sleep in any regular room and will be relegated to sleeping in the living room, which typically and almost always is on the first floor of a house. You can also make a safe house in one of the warehouses scattered around Knox County, but you'll stay panicked anytime you enter a house. The most annoying thing about claustrophobic is it limits your ability to find a spot to sleep. With agoraphobic, the challenge is in reverse, and since it is likely you'll be spending a good chunk of time clearing outdoor zombies, you'll be doing so massively panicked the entire time. Being panicked limits your periphery vision, which means an ambush is more likely to happen. Also, panic affects accuracy and damage done, although the chances of knocking down a zombie increases with panic. I call these traits situational because it could make sense to take claustrophobic in the event you intend to do a outdoor run. Both will save you 4 points. And rounding out my last C tier negative trait would be clumsy. And frankly, I don't see a value in a permanent trait that increases sound radius and chances of falling from lunging zombies, which can cause injury and place you in harm's way. This is particularly true if you're trying to finish zombies coming in through windows or over fences. Plus, clumsy will save you only 2 points. You're about to notice a common theme amongst my D-tier traits, the positive traits at least. The majority of them are tied to skills that, in my opinion, could just as easily be taken care of with skill books and a little resolve. Most aren't relevant in the early game when you're basically struggling just to get by, and aside from maybe some roleplay possibilities, aren't worth the cost to grab them in my opinion. In short order, they are First Aider, which gives you a +1 in First Aid and costs 4 points, Gardener, which gives you +1 in Farming and costs 4 points, Angler, which gives you a +1 in Fishing and costs 4 points, and Sewer, which gives you a +1 in Tailoring and costs 4 points, Cook, which gives you a +2 in Cooking and costs a whopping 6 points, Former Scout, which gives you a +1 in First Aid and Foraging and costs 6 points, and finally Hiker, which gives you a +1 in Foraging and Trapping and costs 6 points. The plus 75% XP bonuses that each of these traits give for their respective skills are nice, but once again, most of these traits are more beneficial in mid-game and can easily be mitigated by the eventual grind of mid-game. Probably a more controversial call here, but I'm including Athletic in the D tier list simply for the cost. It's 10 points, and it just really doesn't give 10 points worth of value, in my opinion. I know what I said in terms of how hard it is to build up both strong and fit, and while 4 levels of fitness is good, the only benefit is that it improves your stamina while running or sprinting, and let's be honest, you shouldn't be running or sprinting anywhere. The next trait is strictly a value-based decision, as in my eyes it doesn't provide enough value for the points it's asking for. At one point, Adrenaline Junkie was a good trait to take if you were able to combine it with other traits that increase panic, but since the latest update, they have removed the ability to combine it with, say, agoraphobic or claustrophobic, which made for continuous panic, thus triggering the Adrenaline Junkie perk. Those days are gone, and considering that the zombie-induced panic subsides over time anyway, a +8 trait has significantly reduced value in my opinion. And finally, rounding out my D tier are Brave and Light Eater. Brave is supposed to help you panic less when you are up against a horde, but that said, your panic will go down as time passes anyway, so at 4 points, I'll just stay panicked or take a beta blocker or two to calm my nerves for the first month or two. Light Eater could present problems in the later game in terms of calories consumed, because unless you're eating high-calorie items like fish and chips and whatnot, the chances of you losing weight even at a normal eating levels are high. This may change when Build 42 drops and they start to fix the nutrition system though. I should call this section on my tier list Traits that appear manageable, but that you will regret later on. First on the list is Disorganized, which will save you 4 points and will cost 30% of your inventory space. Project Zomboid is primarily a looting game, and anything that costs inventory will make life much harder on doing loot runs in Knox County. This not only affects your backpack, but household storage as well as trunks and car storage. While it may seem prudent to save 6 points on a trait like Slow Learner, it can be particularly aggravating when you realize that some skills take much longer to level up. For example, something like leveling the electrical skill is something that must be grinded to level up and takes a hot minute anyway, without losing that 30% of XP because your character falls in the special category. In Project Zomboid, your ability to kill zombies quickly and effectively is tied to several moodles. If you are tired or exhausted, it can have a downward spiral effect because the more tired you become, the more times you have to strike to kill, and the more times you have to strike to kill, the more tired you become. Because of this, the next 2 traits are traits that you will most likely quickly regret taking because both affect the quality of sleep you can get, or they chew up more time doing that thing. At 4 points, you'll be more likely to become tired 30% more often, making it more likely that you'll be fighting tired or spending more time not fighting at all with Sleepyhead. And you can save 6 points with Restless Sleeper, but at the cost of the same thing. The only difference would be rather than getting a restful night's sleep, you're more likely to sleep less throughout the night, meaning you would need cat naps to stay fully recharged during the day. The next trait on the D list comes with a story from Build 40 and will illustrate how the developers of the game can throw a haymaker by changing what was once a gimme trait to take to one that can be highly annoying. A few years back, I took a character with hemophobic, which is now called simply Fear of Blood. In the Build 40 mechanics, the panic only came when a character had to tend a scratch or a laceration, and it was a momentary second of panic. Then they changed things. With Fear of Blood trait, you not only get panicked when you are tending to wounds, but almost immediately when you get any sort of blood on your clothes, which means that you will have to wash your body and clothes daily. To add additional aggravation to the trait, doing things like walking over a bloody spot on the floor will transfer the blood to your shoes, which will lead to panic as well. Saving points to deal with the aggravation of staying clean has very little value in my opinion. If you need just 1 point to get another positive trait, it would seem wise to take Sunday Driver for that point. until you realize that your max speed in a car is 30 miles per hour, and if you were to take it off the road, that speed would be reduced even further. This becomes very problematic when you are driving through a city's epicenter where every zombie you hit will slow you down. And finally, rounding out the list is overweight, which will save you 6 points, but comes at a much higher cost than choosing its counterpart, underweight. While it is true that it is easier to lose weight than to gain weight in Project Zomboid, overweight puts a limit on your max fitness to 9 and gives you a 200% endurance loss, which can be absolutely catastrophic if you're clearing hordes in a city setting. Stamina regeneration is much slower than normal generation, and the likelihood of getting tripped up by a lunging zombie is almost 100% every time. I'm not necessarily tearing up either of these traits because I view them as situational traits than anything else. If you're using custom sandbox settings and making nights pitch black, then Cat's Eyes, which costs just 2 points, would be particularly useful. However, if you aren't using pitch black nights, then it's been my experience that you can see fine in the darkness. If you're playing with a reduced amount of loot, say insanely rare loot, Lucky might be a good trait to grab as it increases your chances of finding loot by 10%. At 4 points though, it's still a bit expensive for my blood. Finally, if you're thinking about doing an outdoorsman run, then the Hunter trait combined with the Herbalist trait will have you surviving fairly easily in the wild. The Herbalist trait, which costs 6 points, will allow you to forego finding the Herbalist magazine to know what plants are edible and which are poisonous. The Hunter trait automatically gives you a bonus in short blade, sneaking, trapping, and aiming, and increases the search radius when foraging. At 8 points, it's a bit pricey, but once again, this is a situational pick. And finally, my F tier list for positive and negative traits. This is the bottom of the barrel, y'all. The traits I don't touch because frankly they offer little to no value in the current Project Zomboid world, or the price point is too expensive for what you are getting. In no particular order, thick-skinned, which does offer you a chance to not damage your clothes walking through trees, does not really strongly affect your chances of not getting bit. At 8 points, this is entirely too expensive for the benefit. Nutritionist comes in at 6 points, and until the devs revamp the nutrition system, it does nothing but window dress what you are eating. I'll likely change my mind on this when Build 42 drops and they start to revamp the nutrition system though. Iron Gut at a cost of 3 points is too expensive considering that once again, if you aren't eating rotten food or poisonous berries and mushrooms or drinking bad water, you should be okay. And finally, Eagle-Eyed, which comes in at a cost of 6 points. While Keen Hearing is a steal at 6 points, Eagle-Eyed hasn't yet improved the periphery vision enough for the cost of the trait in my opinion. Plus, most people get killed from things behind them, not things in front of them. Well, we've nearly reached the end, y'all, of this exhaustive tier list, and one thing you'll notice in the next group is that I have a personal hate for traits that interfere with either the looting or killing process of the game. In no particular order, obese and very underweight will save you 10 points for each, but at the cost of a fitness cap of 6 and endurance regeneration of 40% of normal in the case of obese, and -2 fitness with a 60% debuff and melee damage in the case of very underweight. If I was forced to choose one of the two, I'd probably choose very underweight though, because that fitness cap is brutal for obese, and this is despite the fact that putting on weight in Project Zomboid is especially tough. Weak and unfit both save 10 points as well, but at the cost of either stamina in the case of unfit or loot encumbrance in the case of weak. Feeble and out of shape do the same, but to a lesser degree and at a smaller cost of 6 points. I would recommend against any of those traits. Once again, the strength and fitness skills take forever to level, which would mean it would take months even with daily exercise to reach an above normal level. Asthmatic is an especially troubling trait considering that stamina loss is at 130% with every swing of your weapon. As an aside, I really wish there was a puffer that could help with the stamina regeneration. They did have asthma puffers in the 90s, right? The asthmatic trait could save you 5 points, but asthma is something that will never go away, and there's currently no treatment to handle the problem in-game. What could possibly be the absolute worst trait to take on this list is All Thumbs. It saves you a paltry 2 points, but increases loot exchange time by 400%. In my opinion, they could make this trait worth 10 points, and I still wouldn't take it. This is how much I hate the All Thumbs trait. Thin-skinned was a trait that had value before Build 41, but now the cons have outweighed the pros. At 8 points, you are now much more likely to get scratched or lacerated while walking through brush or trees, and it may be me, but it feels like a bite is almost instantaneous in the event you are noshed on. Rounding out the list are illiterate and deaf. There is currently no way to pick up the generator skill without reading the skill book, as well as fix cars, so choosing the illiterate trait will mean a lot of walking in your future, and once the power goes out, no chance of harnessing electricity for your base. At 8 points saved, there is simply no value until the developers add a secondary way to learn these necessary skills. With deaf, it's more of a quality of life thing for me, as I love the ambiance of Zomboid, and with deaf, this all goes away. A Project Zomboid world of no sounds is no fun for me. You can save 12 points by choosing deaf. That's a wrap, y'all. My tiered list of Project Zomboid traits for Build 41. Leave me a comment if you agree or disagree on my order of things. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a thumbs up on your way out. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos. I'm Drunkonlife. Goodbye.